year. I mean, some years we have phenomenal production, like 2014 seemed to be a great year. And it's dropped off a little bit the last couple of years. The Quashnet seems to hang on, bouncing up and down a little bit. And then the Childs River, we put the fish in 2008. After we put them in, there was a big bounce, a big year of reproduction in 2009. We had another good year in 2013. But the last few years, it was starting to decline. The same thing on the Kunamesset. We put the fish in 2013, 2014. We had a good spawn. That initial time when you put the fish in seems to be the best spawn. You know, then as the population develops, whether they prey on their young or other things, it seems to go down. And until this past year, I was getting very concerned. If I was giving this talk last year, I would be very, very concerned. It seemed like all my catches were going down. You know, between 2014 and 2017, there was a downward trend, which had me very concerned. We did see a little uptick this past year, and hopefully the trout populations will recover in these streams, and hopefully this was a forecast of some better trout reproduction in the next few years. But it just shows you some of the variability and some of the things that we're learning with this pit tagging.
I was just curious about that kind of collective downturn. Do you think that had to do with precipitation rates and overall water levels in the river?
It could be. That's probably, if they're all going down, that's probably the climactic thing. And one of the things Ben Letcher out at the Conti Lab has discovered is they have better year classes. The colder the summer is, the better the year class strength. And that's, hopefully one of these days I'll be able to sit down and look at some of this data. A lot of times I'm out there busy collecting the data, maintaining the antennas, and I have this like window of opportunity in January, February to try to look at those things, to look at some of the data that we have that other people have collected and compare it and try to tease out what's actually driving these populations. But these large-scale climate factors are a huge impact on fish populations. Next slide. So to give you some idea of the data that we're collecting, these are just some individual fish that I just kind of threw up there, just to give you some idea of how the fish grow. So this data here is actually individual fish that we pit tagged over a number of years. And so we pit tag fish of different sizes, different year classes, and we don't always recover them. You know, we may recover maybe like 10 to 20% of the ones that we tag. We actually recover and can get a length on them. We get about 40% of them actually hit the antennas, so we get the recovery that way. But it gives you some idea. So generally in the fall of the year, they're anywhere from 70 millimeters to about 120 millimeters. They basically double their size that next year. They're about 8 inches long at the end of the first year. So these are 0. These would be the 1+. At 2+, they're about 10 inches long. And very few fish make it to age 3, where they're about 14 inches long. And I'll talk about some individual fish that can exceed that. One of these days I hope to sit down and I have bits and pieces so I can get a graph to give you an average, but this was just an example of some individual fish that I had in the records and how they actually grew. Next slide. But the other thing I want to mention, they don't grow beyond 4. That's one of the things with the pit tagging. They don't last beyond 4 years of age, and very few actually make it to 3. So another stream that we've spent a lot of time on, you'll hear a lot about, is Red Brook. We bought the Century bought from A.D. Makepeace in 2010. And as part of the agreement, they were going to grow cranberries there for 5 years, and then they were going to build a channel for us before they pulled out. So they completed this herring channel in 2016, and this is the idea. It's going to maintain a passageway for herring to get up into White Island Pond, and also offer some opportunities to cool off the water instead of going through the main channel. So this is where the water used to flow, was the main channel of Century Bog, which is completely wide open to the sun, and it would routinely get very warm. Now that main channel is filling in with vegetation, and we're running the fish up through this new herring channel. Next slide. This is what it looks like in 2018. We did have some problems this past year. You remember all the storms we had? The water levels were so high at White Island Pond, they were actually spilling over the dam. And so it came down that herring channel, and it was directed against this bank on the old bog, and it blew out the bank. There was just so much water coming down in there. Since that time, we were able to level this off with a tractor the last couple of weeks, and I actually have fabric similar to what was put in here. The division was able to buy about, I'm trying to think how many thousands of dollars worth of trees. It was over 400 trees that we planted this June up along the channel. June is not the best time of year to plant trees, but the way the state works, that's the end of the fiscal year, that's when we get the money. So we were out there in the June, in the heat, transplanting these trees, and we actually had pretty good survival of the trees. We lost a few, but more of them survived than I thought, and hopefully these will grow up and shade this channel to offer even more cold water habitat downstream. Next slide.
What kind of trees?
It was a variety from oaks on the upland, red maples, there was tupelos, there was clethra, there was a bunch of different varieties of trees. So to give you some example of the fish that we're seeing in Red Brook, some of these pictures Jeff took. I'm usually the hand model. When you see a nice picture of a trout, it's usually my hands holding them. I don't have personally that many good pictures because it's tough to hold them yourself. And but this is a picture of a nice trout that we got at Red Brook in 2016. Next slide. And in May of 2017, we actually, I think it was Christophe Paris was out there. He took some great photos and he sent me, so you can see pictures of me, that's somebody else that's taken the picture. But this was the largest fish that we got at Red Brook. It was 408 millimeters, about 16-inch fish. And you can see how girthy it was there. I'm actually measuring it on the board and holding it. And the great thing about this fish is we had a lot of good recapture data on it. We had actually tagged it in May of 2016. It was a big fish then. It was about 13 inches long. We recaptured it in the fall. It had only grown 2 millimeters. These fish don't grow very much in the summer. They're just trying to survive. Here in Massachusetts in the summer, trout are just trying to survive and they're breathing. They're basically not putting any of that energy into growth. They're just trying to survive. And we've been seeing that with the pit data. We have very little growth in the summer. It's in the winter when these fish grow a lot. So this fish grew from 339 millimeters, about 14 inches, to 408 millimeters over the winter. So it grew 4 inches over the winter, and that's a lot for a big fish like this. He probably almost doubled in its weight if I had the weight data. And the unique thing about this, we actually had some of the pit tagging data. You can see this fish bouncing. Antenna 1 is at the head of tide, and the other one is about 50 meters upstream, so it's bouncing around. And then here, in the fall, the last time we saw it was that antenna. And then we picked it up again in May. So this is the classic example of a salter movement pattern where they drop down into the tide water in the winter and they come back in the spring. That's what the old timers used to say. They drop down after the spawn and they come back in May. And this one came back in April, so it was pretty close. But this fish was down in the tidal area of Red Brook and it spent that winter. And that's how it grew 4 inches, was taking advantage of that tidal area. Next slide. Here's another one that grew from 10 inches to 14 inches between September of 2016 and May of 2017. So we were lucky to get some big fish that year that we actually had some data. And you can see this is very similar, that pattern. It dropped down into the salt water. And we've got some 14-inch fish out of the Washington before that never did drop down in the salt water. But so they can grow rapidly, not going down in salt water. We actually had some great data on these fish that actually went down in the tide water and grew phenomenally. Next slide. So here's some other pictures of that year. Red Brook attracts a lot of attention. Sometimes it's almost a circus, the amount of people we have down there. We had a bunch of different people in there. Jeff Reardon from Trying to Limit. You see Warren Winders from Southeastern Mass chapter. Adam Kotza, our cold water biologist, was there. That's something new since 2014. We actually have a cold water biologist in the state, which I'm very glad to see. And Adam's come down and joined us for the sampling, and he's very excited about the work that we've done down here in Cape Cod and Southeastern Mass. And he's been a great partner in helping us out in terms of the management of these resources. And we could also, some of this this reader here that was funded by Trout Unlimited National and Sea Run Brook Trout Coalition, a new reader to help us do research on these fish.
One comment I want to make on this picture. So Jeff Reardon, I feel very bad about this. Jeff Reardon, who's up in Maine, is now looking, and you guys aren't going to like this, he's now looking for a red brook in Maine. I'm sorry he's not looking for a Quashnet in Maine, but he's looking for a Red Brook in Maine to start doing restoration up there because of this time coming down. He spent the night at the Lyman Cottage. It was a gas. The Lyman ghosts come out if you've ever been there. And he experienced the whole thing, and he was there when these big fish were caught, and that's one of the reasons that he got excited about going back to Maine and finding the Red Brook in Maine, and he can begin a restoration project up there. So that's really exciting.
That's one of the things that I put it out in your newsletter when we're doing this sampling, and you're welcome to come out and help us observe and actually see some of the restoration work we've been doing on the Quashnet and other streams, is to come out and actually see what we actually catch. But we also had some members of the trustees out there that day as well. Next slide. Some unusual things, I just kind of threw this in. This was a kind of a weird looking brook trout. Doesn't have any red spots. This one actually was a recapture. We had caught this fish before and noted that it didn't have any red spots. And we caught it a year later and it still didn't. So there's some unusual things that you see out there as you sample these streams year after year. And that's one of the most important things about this type of research, is this long-term monitoring and see the changes from year to year. And that's one of the things that I've been trying to emphasize to our Westboro staff, is the importance of long-term monitoring, trying to find out information on streams and other resources. Next slide. This one's not going to work. I'll try to play this at the end. This was an example of a video you can get online. It might be on Jeff's website. Just happened to be out there one day during what's called a king tide, which is the biggest tides of the year. Mass Maritime Academy was out there doing the monitoring, and right where I saw these fish spawning before, they measured some salinity. It was almost full-strength seawater, and I'll show you afterwards the actual video that I took. But this was actually trout that were spawning underneath salt water. It just happened to be there at the right time, and we also had that data from Mass Maritime Academy to go along with it as well. And I'll show that at the end. Next slide. You have to update, I guess, with Microsoft. You have to be connected to the internet to allow you to edit, so we weren't able to do that. So some other things we're seeing with the pit tagging data is the response of fish to different environmental stimuli. And one of the things when I was doing the data, I plotted out on here's the date in July, and this is the time here, so midnight until like 8 o'clock at night. And this is kind of tough to interpret if you know what it means, but this is like early morning. The fish move along in the early morning hours, and then right at dusk, there's a peak of movement. Right after dusk, they tend to move a lot. And one of the things that kind of came out at me, there was fish moving 1 hour different every day. And when I looked into that, it basically corresponded to the tides. So at Red Brook, there just happened to be a lot of fish down in that one area that were picking up in the antenna. And as that warm tide came in the afternoon, they would get pushed up with that. And so we were able to pick that up on our pit antennas. And so that's some great information of fish actually reacting to the environmental stimuli and actually, kind of get out of that warm weather. This doesn't happen every year, it just so happens. So that's why it's important, these long-term studies, to try to pick up certain things like that you might miss with just a one-year study. Next slide.
Is that the movement of the water or the salinity in the water?
I believe it's the temperature. Because the salinity, if you notice, it was like just in the afternoon that they were doing it. The salinity was the same the morning and the evening, but it was the afternoon, the temperature